To order. Welcome to meeting number 20 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. Pursuant to the House of Commons Order of Reference adopted on Thursday, February 10th, 2022, the committee is meeting on Bill C8, an act to implement certain provisions of the Economic and Fiscal Update tabled in Parliament on December 14th, 2021, and other measures. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, so you're aware the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. Today's meeting is also taking place in the webinar format. Webinars are for public committee meetings and are available only to members, their staff, and witnesses. Members enter immediately as active participants. All functionalities for active participants remain the same. Staff will be non-active participants and can therefore only view the meeting in gallery view. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. Given the ongoing pandemic situation, and in light of the recommendations from the health authorities, as well as the directive of the Board of the Internal Economy on October 19th, 2021, to remain healthy and safe, all those attending the meeting in person are to maintain a 2-meter physical distancing, must wear a non-medical mask when circulating in the room, and it is highly recommended that the mask be worn at all times, including when seated. Must maintain proper hand hygiene by using the provided hand sanitizer at the room entrance. As the chair, I'll be enforcing these measures during the duration of the meeting, and I thank members in advance for their cooperation. To ensure an orderly meeting, I'd like to outline a few rules to follow. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately, and we will ensure the interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. The raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen can be used at any time if you wish to speak or alert the chair. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in the committee room. Keep in mind the Board of Internal Economy's guidelines for mask use and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the proceedings and verification officer. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. With regard to a speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do the best that we can to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. The committee agreed that during these hearings, the chair enforced the rule that the response by a witness to a question take no longer than the time taken to ask the question. That being said, I request that members and witnesses mutually treat each other with respect and decorum. If you think the witness has gone beyond the time, it is the member's prerogative to interrupt or ask the next question, and to be mindful of other members' time allocation during the meeting. I also request that members not go much over their allotted question time. Though we will not interrupt during a member's allotted time, I'd like to keep you informed that our clerk has 2 clocks, one for our members and the other for witnesses. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses. Joining us as an individual.
Mr. Chair, can I just quickly interject and ask you to set aside 15 minutes at the end of this meeting so we can discuss the business of this committee and the numerous studies we have in front of us to be discussed next week and further there too, including the motion that we put in front of the committee earlier this week. Would that be okay for 15 minutes at the end?
I look to the members. That will take up some of the witness time. It looks like members are in agreement. Okay, we'll allocate some time at the end of the meeting. Thank you, MP McLean. And now just back to, and I apologize to our witnesses for that, just a slight interruption. We have, as an individual, we have Patrick Talon. He's the professor and associate director of the Center for Constitutional and Administrative Law Studies, Faculty of Law, University of Laval. We have from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Mark Agnew, Senior Vice President, Policy and Government Relations. From the Office of the Parliamentary Budget Officer, Yves Giraud, Parliamentary Budget Officer, and I believe there's been a change here also joining Mr. Giraud. I apologize, members. We have Louis Perrault, Director of Economic Analysis. And from the Transparency International Canada, we have James Cohen, the Executive Director. We're now going to hear opening statements from witnesses, each of the witnesses, one for each of the groups. We'll have up to 5 minutes to make their opening remarks before we move to members' questions. And we'll start with, as an individual, Patrick Taillon for 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me begin, first of all, by thanking the members of this committee for this invitation. My remarks will be brief and will focus only on the issue of the Underused Housing Tax Act. Let's be clear. This is not about criticizing the political opportunity of the measure. In the midst of a housing crisis and with prices skyrocketing, it seems like a good idea. And as a professor of law, I don't have the expertise to assess this idea of what the results might be. However, this alone, it's not a reason to abandon or disregard our constitutional principles. From the Charter of Rights to the division of powers, the spirit and the letter of the Constitution must be respected. Without prior consultation with the provinces and obtaining their approval, without taking certain legal precautions, this good idea is risky. Clearly, the true nature of this law is related to the framework on housing legislation. And there's no doubt that housing comes under the exclusive jurisdiction of the provinces in the area of private law on property, on civil law, and more generally, social policy and local affairs. To dodge this obstacle, to find a way around it, a way to circumvent or even to contravene the division of powers of the Constitution, the drafters are attempting to disguise a regulatory measure, a measure designed to sanction certain housing practices, as a form of taxation, a new tax, a tax which, for the first time in history of the Federation, at least to my knowledge, leads the government to occupy or encroach on a type of taxation that it had until then been wise enough to leave to the local authorities of cities and provinces. And here I'm talking, obviously, about the property tax. Now, one of two things. There are two different scenarios here. The first scenario, it's a way of regulating housing law because it's outside the competence of the federal parliament. In other words,
obviously and directly linked to the housing law, and then the bill is unconstitutional. The essential character of the bill, its pith and substance, is provincial. Il s'agit là de la façon la plus logique.
This is the first way of qualifying the law. But in the long run, only the courts can, a posteriori, confirm this way of analyzing the matter. And if this happens, this would automatically lead to the invalidation of the law. Now we get to the second scenario. The other way of looking at this, of hiding the true nature of the law, is that it will be behind the tax penalty accompanying the federal housing law regulation. It's not a question of claiming that it is just merely a tax. In this case, it's a dangerous precedent, which, without cooperative federalism, risks aggravating the fragile fiscal balance within the Federation.
If the bill is interpreted as a new tax, the bill will be unfair. Without negotiation and cooperation with the provinces, a federal property tax compromises our fiscal balance. Since the Confederation, property tax is a local and provincial tool. It's not a good idea to borrow this tool from local authorities. Bref, si le fédéralisme coopératif
In short, if cooperative federalism makes sense, the least that can be done is to consult and negotiate agreements to implement this policy within the spirit and letter of the Constitution. The cooperative arrangement should also avoid entrenching a federal role in property taxes. Canadian federalism involves tax competition. The federal government has the right to use all fiscal tools, but it must also act with a modicum of cooperation. Once this precedent is set, we have to act with a modicum of cooperation so as to leave each partner the appropriate fiscal space necessary for its mission. History shows us that once the precedent is set, once the Revenue Agency has developed the practical tools to collect property taxes, well, we can see what's happened in the past. The taxation was supposed to be temporary. There was a corporate income tax was supposed to be temporary, but in both cases there was an exceptional situation. Here I refer to personal income tax during the Second World War. To conclude, to legislate provincial parity in this area, the law applies only where an agreement is negotiated with the provinces. The fiscal balance within the Federation is already very fragile, and it will be even more so. There's federal health underfunding. There's an explosion of needs with the COVID-19 crisis, so that the provinces are under a great deal of pressure to look for other sources of funding. The federalism implies respect for exclusive provincial jurisdiction in housing law and an obligation of cooperation between the Federation's partners. Many solutions are possible. For example, it's always better to have legislation that doesn't necessarily rely on a court decision that will null something. We have risks now. Even if the tribunals find it valid, this will have an impact on the tax competition. And we know that school boards and municipalities have very little maneuver room right now. Thank you very much.
Merci, Monsieur Talon.
Thank you, Mr. Taillon.
The Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Agnew, for 5 minutes.
Well, Chair and honorable members, it's a pleasure to be back at this committee. The Economic and Fiscal Update, which I'll call EFU for short, included a number of critical elements for Canadian businesses. I want to focus my remarks on both the elements within Bill C-8 as well as provide a broader perspective on some of the elements from the EFU. The first element where I want to underscore our strong support is the funding that was provided for rapid testing. The Canadian Chamber has seen firsthand the benefits of rapid testing through our rapid testing initiative that has distributed over 8 million rapid test kits across the country through local chambers directly to small and medium-sized enterprises. Simply put, these kits are what are helping many businesses stay open and increasing both employee and consumer confidence. And certainly we believe the rapid tests will remain a critical part of the toolkit as we navigate the endemic existence of COVID-19 in the months and years ahead. The second element where I want to voice our support is related to the Small Business Air Quality Improvement Tax Credit. Given the transmission vectors for COVID, we need to maintain support for ventilation to again ensure safe workplaces that will build confidence for consumers as these consumer-facing businesses continue to ramp up their capacity limits under provincial health regulations. The third element I want to briefly highlight is the refundable tax credit to support farmers. Climate change's impact on agriculture has given the industry a stake in taking action, and they're ready to do their part. However, inflationary costs are affecting farmers who face unique needs in Canada. The credit in Bill C-8 is a welcome start, but some of the industry will certainly need more. For example, in harsh climates where grain drying is important or heating for livestock is needed, higher proportions of carbon-based energy products are used. And certainly we encourage parliamentarians to look at building on Bill C-8 going forward, such as the studying of Bill C-234. Shifting briefly to the contents of the broader EFU, I want to highlight a few other areas of interest to parliamentarians in the Canadian business community. The Canadian Chamber was glad to see an extension to the HASCAP program, given the challenges still facing businesses, as well as the streamlined deduction for home office exemptions, given that we're expecting remote working will continue for the remainder of the 2022 calendar year for many business operations. We also noted in the speech on the EFU and the subsequent extension that was announced for CEBA payments to December 2023. This is a welcome step for many of our members, and we hope that there can be a further 12-month extension through to December 2024. And I think underscoring the support, I'd like to point out to members that we had our Chamber annual general meeting last autumn, where the extension through to December 2024 was voted in support overwhelmingly by delegates from across the country to support those from the hardest hit sectors. We also noted the government's continued intent in the EFU to move ahead with the digital services tax, which was recently affirmed in a Ways and Means motion tabled just before the Christmas recess. The Chamber continues to have concerns with not only the design features in the bill, but also the retroactive application and the issues that it poses in our relationship with the United States. And we hope that the government will instead prioritize its efforts towards a multilateral digital services tax agreement that's been agreed through the OECD and G20. Finally, we also noted towards net zero 2050, there certainly is no panacea. And with a range of tools, CCUS will be a critical item for the realities of the Canadian economy, not only for the oil and gas sector, but also other sectors like fertilizer, cement, and utilities. The tax credit design and rates not only need to ensure the credit is viable, but also recognizing that CCUS is going to be a critical part of Canada's transition towards net zero 2050 and also our short-term 2030 climate targets. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on both the contents of Bill C8 as well as the broader economic and fiscal update, and I look forward to taking questions from members in the Q&A.
Well, thank you, Mr. Agnew. And now we're going to hear from the Office of the Parliamentary Budget Officer. And we had just heard Monsieur Giraud, you were just with us at one of our last meetings, and Monsieur Perrault. So for 5 minutes, please.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chairs, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to appear today. With me today, I have Louis Perrault, Director, Economic Analysis. My office has published costing notes addressing several measures in Part 1 of Bill 6A. First, we prepared a costing of the measure to increase the eligible educator school supply tax credit from 15% to 25% for eligible teaching supplies of up to $1,000. We found that this measure would cost $7 million on January 31st. We also released a costing of the underused Housing Tax Act measure that would implement a 1% tax on the value of dwellings owned by non-resident non-Canadians that are vacant or underused. We estimated that this measure would generate $130 million in tax revenues in 2022-2023 and an estimated total revenue of $600 million over the next 5 years.
English. We also costed the Small Business Air Quality Improvement Tax Credit, which would provide a 25% refundable tax credit for the installation or upgrade of ventilation and air filtration systems in small and medium-sized businesses. We estimate that this credit would cost $165 million over the next 5 years, beginning in the current fiscal year. Finally, we released a report this morning providing an assessment of house prices relative to a household's capacity to borrow and pay for the purchase of a house in selected Canadian cities. We found that at the end of 2021, the average house price was more than 50% above what a household earning average incomes can afford in Hamilton, Toronto, Halifax, and Ottawa, and between 30 and 45% of what the average households could afford in Vancouver, Victoria, and Montreal. I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you may have about our work as a whole. My office and I look forward to reviewing your suggestions on how we can best serve the committee and help you in your work examining Bill C8 and throughout the 44th Parliament. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Giraud. And
Thank you, Mr. Giraud.
hear from Transparency International Canada and James Cohen.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me back to speak to you today. My name is James Cohen, and I am the Executive Director of Transparency International Canada. TI Canada is a registered charity and is the Canadian chapter of Transparency International, the world's leading anti-corruption movement. Concerning Bill C-8, I would like to focus my remarks on Part 2, Underused Housing Tax Act. Here, I would draw the committee's attention on the difficulty that the government will face identifying what is outlined under Interpretation and General Rules of Application as specified Canadian corporation. Canada has had weak beneficial ownership laws that have allowed individuals to hide their identity behind anonymous corporations, trusts, and nominees. A foreign buyer of Canadian property could funnel their funds, whether licit or illicit, through various jurisdictions, ultimately landing in an anonymous Canadian incorporated company with nominee directors signing for it. In 2016, TI Canada's report, No Reason to Hide, found that out of the 100 most valuable properties in Vancouver, no one truly knows who owned 46% of them. In a 2016 report, Opacity, Why Criminals Love Canadian Real Estate and What to Do About It, TI Canada and our partners conducted a risk assessment of money laundering vulnerabilities in the Greater Toronto Area real estate. Between 2008 and 2018, we found that companies own 37% of homes valued at more than $5 million and more than half of homes over $7 million. I would like to stress that there is nothing inherently illegal about establishing a numbered company or purchasing a property through one. However, I flag these numbers to the committee as a warning on a critical hurdle that will face the Underused Housing Tax Act. Thankfully, there is progress being made on beneficial ownership transparency in Canada. TI Canada applauded the government for proposing a publicly accessible corporate beneficial ownership registry in the 2021 budget. The government recommitted this proposal on the world stage at the US-hosted Summit for Democracies in December last year. Canada still has to wait some time, however, for the registry as it has been pledged for 2025. Until it is up and running and developed to a high standard to verify data, there's still a problem of anonymous corporations being used to purchase property. As well, the provinces and territories need to help this effort by also legislating beneficial ownership transparency. British Columbia has a land ownership transparency registry, although it has flaws. Quebec passed Bill 78 that will make beneficial ownership information publicly available on their corporate registry. Going forward, I would encourage all federal parties on converging on an agreement about the need for the publicly accessible beneficial ownership registry and speak with provincial and territorial counterparts to bring them on board. In the context of housing, it will help add supply without even hammering a nail. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cohen, and I'm sure the committee members have many questions for all our witnesses. We are going to be starting with our first round of questions from members. Each party has up to 6 minutes to ask those questions. We're starting with the Conservatives and MP Lawrence for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank all of you for your testimony. Very much appreciated. As you are all aware, C8 was a fiscal aid update whose stated purpose was to help the Canadian economy recover from the pandemic. However, in the interim, we've had another significant event. This government's escalation of the Ottawa protests has now led to the invocation of the Emergency Measures Act. Amongst the powers the government has given itself is the ability to freeze dissenters' bank accounts, and I read from the proclamation. Payment processors are to report certain transactions to the and Report Analysis Center of Canada, and to require any financial service provider to determine whether they have in possession or in control property that belongs to a person who participates in the blockade. In the Minister of Justice's comments to the media, he clearly included political dissent in those comments. My concern is for the economy and the economic impact that will have. And perhaps I'll start with you, Mr. Talon, and with respect to if, in fact, these were, if the government overreached with these powers and Canadians felt as though their assets were exposed and could potentially be frozen because of political dissent, what impact could that have on the economy? Monsieur Talon?
Bien, moi,
I came here to comment on the Underused Housing Tax Act. This is a tax that will generate, it won't drain a lot of resources. We're more or less dealing with a question of disguised regulation to prohibit, well, not prohibit, but to sanction certain behaviors when it comes to housing. I don't see this measure as being one that will bring in a great deal of revenue. As for the purpose of your question, I believe that you are referring to the announcements made this week. I haven't had an opportunity to really look at the text per se.
Mr. Cohen is similar on the similar vein there. Do you believe that the government has been transparent?
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. Yeah, point of order.
Yeah, we here and the witnesses are here to debate C8 and not the Emergencies Act. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's just relevance, MP Lawrence, to keep it to C8. Thank you.
I believe that I actually have a wide view, and I think I've already stated those comments, so I'm going to continue. And so, Mr. Cohen, do you believe that the government has been transparent with respect to the implementation of the financial aspects of the Emergencies Act?
Point of order.
Point of order.
Chair, again, the question has nothing to do with C8, and we're here to study C8. The witnesses have been invited to study C8. I would just ask that all the members focus on the bill before us, which is why the witnesses are here, and we're all here.
Yes, please. So the witnesses are here for C8. That's the remarks that they've made to C8. And MP Lawrence, just if we stick to C8, please.
I appreciate the chair's comment, but I'll continue with the question. Mr. Cohen, please.
Point of order.
Point of order.
Yes, we let the witnesses, not just us, but the witness too, the earlier witness says that he's here to answer the bill C8. And that's why we have invited our witness today and not to discuss the Emergencies Act and hypothetical result. So I don't know that I don't know how to reframe it to my colleague, Mr. Lawrence. It's not relevant to C8.
So relevance to C8 and respect to the witnesses, that's what they are here for.
So I think, but these events intercede with our economy, which is what we are here to study in C8, and so this forms the very background and has really changed dramatically our discourse, including the discourse on C8. So, Mr. Cohen, if you'd kindly respond, and I'm hoping my time is being adjusted for the interruptions there.
Could you repeat the question?
Problem, Mr. Cohen. So I'm, of course, in C8, there are financial measures which give the government the effective ability to freeze bank accounts of political dissenters. Do you believe the government has been transparent in discussing who will be targeted by these measures and which accounts will be frozen and why?
I was invited here to talk about Bill C8. I'll respond to this briefly. I heard the use of illegal blockades, but I'm still to hear what the definition of that term specifically means. I would encourage the government to use a very high standard of transparency in going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. I do appreciate that. Mr. Agnew, just a brief comment. If in fact your members felt like they were their assets could be exposed to a government confiscation for political dissent, would that have a negative impact on your members?
Well, I think certainly in a free and democratic society such as ours, I mean, predictability and the rule of law are absolutely critical for, members. And, that's something that I think we've heard time and time again over the last number of weeks from them on this issue.
Thank you very much. And so with that, with the lack of transparency, the potential impact with Canadians, I would like to bring a motion. I believe that it has been circulated to our members by the clerk in both official languages. If you wish, I can read it.
No, MP Lawrence, this is, as you know, it would be inadmissible at this time to bring that forward.
How so? This is respecting C8, which is on the economy, and you know what? Arguably, financial measures that can confiscate Canadians' assets might have something to do with the economy, Mr. Chair. With respect,
it is not C8. It is not C8, MP Lawrence.
You do not believe that that the emergency measures will not affect the economy?
MP Lawrence, it is not. We are here discussing C8, and that motion has nothing to do with C8.
This motion has everything to do with C8. We need to understand the economic background as to why the fiscal update was put in place. This will have an impact on that and on our revenue and on our very economy.
And MP Lawrence, the witnesses are here for C8, and this has nothing to do with C8. So we are moving, your time is up actually, MP Lawrence, and we are moving to the Liberals, and we've got MP Zarowitz.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order. Was my time adjusted for the discussion and for the point of order?
It was, Mr. Lawrence. I checked with the clerk. Thank you. And we're moving to the Liberals.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I believe there's a motion on the floor that you're ruling out of order, and I think we have to see if it actually is out of order, but it is pertinent to the debate we have here.
It is out of order.
Well, I'm going to have to challenge the chair on that because I do think it is pertinent to what we're studying here right now.
Okay, there's been a challenge to the chair.
Point of order, but it's
point of order.
Maybe a question. So what is the challenge? Is that we are changing the agenda now? Is that what my colleagues, conservative, wants to change the agenda of our meeting? I'm confused, very confused right now, Mr. Chair. Sorry.
Yeah, so MP McLean, what is the point of order? And what
the point of order was a challenge to the chair. I'm sure you heard that, Mr. Chair.
Challenge to the chair on a motion that is inadmissible.
That you ruled inadmissible.
That I ruled inadmissible.
We are challenging that ruling so that it actually is an admissible motion from the floor, pertinent to the discussion that's happening here in committee today.
As Mr. McLean knows, the motion has nothing to do with C8, so it is inadmissible.
Mr. Chair, there's a challenge to the chair on the floor. On your ruling on that. Can we deal with the challenge to the chair, please?
Okay, we will deal with the challenge to the chair. Shall the decision of the chair be sustained?
Mr. Baker.
I sustain the chair's ruling.
Mr. Beach.
Yes.
Madame Chatel.
Sustained.
Ms. Zarowitz.
Yes.
Mr. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Chambers.
Overrule.
Mr. McLean.
Overrule.
Mr. Lawrence.
Overrule.
Mr. Stewart.
Overrule.
Monsieur Sainte-Marie.
No.
Mr. Blakey. Or Miss Ashton.
I support the chair's ruling.
Yeas pour 6, nays contre 5, 5.
Okay, so the chair's decision is sustained. We'll continue. We're moving to MP Zarowitz for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses for being here today at this particularly unprecedented time and very busy time here in Ottawa.
Point of order. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Point of order.
I disagree with the member's comments that this is a dire time in our country because we just tried to talk about emergency measures. They want the entire country to believe this is an emergency,
That's
but
not
yet
a point
we're
of
here
order.
to talk about finance bills.
Not a point of order.
It's getting into debate, Mr. Stewart.
That's just rudely
Ms.
interrupting
Zarowitz.
me. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. So I was thanking all the witnesses for being here today. Thank you. I'm going to start by directing my initial questions to Mr. Agnew from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. As we're trying to reopen and move past COVID, can you talk about the importance of rapid test kits for the safe reopening of workplaces and businesses?
So one of the big things that we've heard from businesses, whether you're a office environment or whether you're a consumer-facing environment, is that confidence is critical to get people back in the door and back at their desks. There's a lot of different ways that you can do that, whether it's vaccinations or rapid testing, and so having the rapid testing there as a tool to screen out asymptomatic positive cases is something that employers have told us has been critical to get employees and customers to come back in and start to have some semblance of normal.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Agnew, part of C8 is that if passed, it'll authorize the Minister of Health to make payments of up to $1.72 billion for these rapid tests to be sent to the provinces and to the territories. Do you have, it's not the first time that the federal government's actually allocating money down to the provinces and territories, and it's to be distributed, and they decide on the distribution. Do you have any recommendations for us as we're giving money down to the provinces and territories? Does more of an allocation need to go to businesses? Do you have any other specific maybe recommendations around the dollars that we're sending down and how we should sort of be allotting it to businesses?
Most of the work that the Chamber's been focused on has been around the physical sort of hardware kits. And certainly there's been far more demand than there is supply for the business community. And so what I would say is that, Chambers, in our experience, genuinely do provide a role for both, their members in the community as well as businesses that aren't members in terms of being able to have a central distribution hub for these things. And I think it's easy to underestimate the value of having a central hub, but in these communities, to having a one-stop shop for businesses to go to get test kits is a really valuable service that is being provided in communities across the country.
And how does it work right now? Do they actually make a request through to the chamber, or do they so how do they actually get rapid tests right now from the provinces?
So the provinces will receive their test kits from the federal government, and then the provinces will then distribute those test kits down to a particular local chamber in the community. And then businesses will go to the chamber's physical location, whether it's a warehouse or a storefront in some cases, and they will physically pick up the test kits from that chamber and bring them back to their workplace. And then there is, of course, a reporting mechanism back up through to provincial health ministries with the results of those tests.
Okay, that's helpful. And I really appreciate your recommendation around the hub. I think that's very useful. Can you then talk a little bit about what the new tax credit for small businesses to support air ventilation improvements will mean for businesses across the country as we are reopening?
Certainly, as businesses are starting to reopen, the cost of everything is going up. And so one of the things that, the government can tangibly do to help businesses be, more sort of competitive and help them to be safer is having this tax credit, because certainly, ventilation has been proven as being one of the ways to reduce a transmission vector for COVID-19.
Okay. Now, is there? Do you provide some standards to businesses so that when businesses are looking to improve their ventilation, there's a standard that is recommended? Is that what you do as the Canadian Chamber of Commerce?
We don't as an organization. I get someone else to do my HVAC work for me, so we're far from experts in that field. But certainly, we would point people towards either their municipal or provincial health authorities for the best place to go about what is the right HEPA filter to have in the workplace.
Okay. And then also, you talked a little bit in your remarks around, you were very positive around the extension of the home office exemptions because you believe that still it's going to take some time for some to actually return back to their original workplaces. Do you have, if you could just talk about the importance of that, and maybe if you have an idea about, do you have any numbers about whether or not people are 50% returning to their workplaces, whether it's 25%, if you can maybe give us an idea about what your data is showing in terms of people returning to their workplaces?
So on the data piece first, we don't have any current data on that because it's quite a rapidly changing environment at the moment. But in terms of the T2200, this is something that we've heard about right from the beginning of the pandemic and the work from home environment. Whether you're a big business or a small business, it's a huge administrative burden to have to issue individual forms to your workforce. And so having the streamlined option, if I can call it that, has been a huge help to take a huge amount of red tape off of the plates of businesses that just don't have the bandwidth.
Okay, that's great. And then just one more question to you. You've indicated that, so part of C8 is actually to extend the repayment date for the CEBA loans to the end of 2023. Can you explain, if we didn't have that extension, how would that be impacting businesses across Canada?
For a lot of businesses that are in the travel, hospitality, and tourism industries, cash flow is a big problem. They missed out on the 2020 and the 2021 tourism seasons, which is when they, bring in the dollars to keep themselves going through the off seasons. And so, not having those extensions would certainly further aggravate the credit crunch that a lot of these, or liquidity problems that a lot of these companies are having at the moment, and get them through at least to the 2022 tourism season, where they can start to build up their cash reserves.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, MP Derowitz. That's the time. We are moving to the block. And Monsieur Samari for 6 minutes.
Oui, merci, Monsieur Fonseca. Donc,
Thank you, Mr. Fonseca. I'd like to thank all of the witnesses for coming here and for providing us with their presentation. My question will be for Professor Taillon with respect to the Underused Housing Tax Act. As he said, the idea may be a good one that is, if you want to change the behavior of owners of empty housing. But if the minister says that we're aware of the scarcity of housing, the lack of housing, and we have to find ways to make property more accessible, the Minister of Finance said that will be part of a whole range of tools to encourage people to not own housing that's left vacant. We'll have a tax. We talked about this with the officials, and I recall my colleague, Mrs. Derowitz, and I said that, yes, while the goal may be good, we're trying to influence behavior, but foreign property owners here who have condos that are being underused are going to be taxed, not for additional resources for the state, but to change the behavior. Professor Taillon, if the measure is not aimed at financing the federal government, but at influencing behavior, do you think that will have an impact on the judges when they deal with this? Yes, we can't simply say that this is a tool that's going to be used simply for this. It's the courts that always have the last say, and they're going to consider the real objective behind the act and its real impact. And we can say, well, this is the intention. This is what we intend to do. This is to come up with this tax. That may be the case, but there's a risk here. And I would ask that the members of the committee take a look at the essential nature of this measure when we're not simply trying to get revenue, when the promised goal is to influence behavior by a measure that's designed to have an impact on the behavior of citizens through regulations. Well, obviously, this is contained in the Act, but we're trying to regulate the behavior of people So you have to attach this, if you like, to a field of jurisdiction, and housing and property ownership. It comes under civil law, and that comes under provincial jurisdiction. And it always has been this way under the Canadian Confederation. So it's important that this bi-jurisdictional nature of the Canadian Confederation, that is common law in the areas outside of Quebec and civic law in Quebec, respects this private law. The federal government has developed all kinds of tools, all kinds of strategies. I don't know if strategy is the right word, but strategies pertaining to housing. They want to play more of a political role in housing. And these measures, when they're taken on a cooperative, collaborative basis with the provinces to help provinces in assuming their responsibilities, well, that will pass the test of the courts. But for instance, spending money in matters that come under provincial jurisdiction, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but this is something that the courts tolerate, providing they're not trying to regulate something that comes under provincial jurisdiction. And so a national housing strategy plays a role in an area that does pertain to the federal government, for example, Indigenous housing. But if we take one further step in an act where we try to regulate, promote certain types of behavior, discourage other types of behavior, well, unless we want to minimize this, the federal government does have jurisdiction in criminal law. But when it comes to housing, we want to discourage but not criminalize behavior. Well, the federal legislator can't adopt such measures. So this whole idea of disguising all this behind a tax, perhaps the courts will say, yes, indeed, this is a tax. I don't think it is, but maybe the courts will decide this way. But there's the other problem that I refer to, that is the balance, the fiscal balance. We're talking here about one type of taxation that is not occupied by the federal field. So when we read the bill, we can see that there are going to have to be different delegation powers that are going to have to be developed in order to manage this tax. We're going to have to come up with another type of mechanism, different from the sales tax. So once this mechanism has been developed, there'll be a strong temptation, as it was in the case in the past. Now that we have this mechanism to administrate property taxes, well, we come up with all kinds of other kinds of ideas to occupy this space, which comes under the jurisdiction of provinces and cities. And they will be angry because they use this property tax. They need it. That's very clear. Thank you very much.
Marie. And we are moving to the NDP. Welcome, MP Ashton, to our committee, and you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. My first question will be directed to the Parliamentary Budget Officer. You've spoken publicly about the late filing of public accounts and the impacts that has on Parliament being able to adequately evaluate government spending in a timely way. C8 proposes over $2 billion in spending for COVID supports for the provinces. We in the NDP believe there should be timely reporting to Canadians on how that money is being spent and the equipment that's being purchased and how it's all being dispersed. This could be accomplished by tabling a quarterly report in the House of Commons. What kind of information do you think would be helpful in such a report to help parliamentarians and Canadians understand how this money is being spent?
Thank you for the question. So that's a very interesting point. I think if there was a desire for parliamentarians to have more information on that type of spending by the federal government, certainly information such as how much was sent to which jurisdiction and to buy which type of equipment at the very minimum would certainly be very helpful for you as legislators in determining whether this funding has been used or is or will be used according to the initial intent of the funding would certainly be very helpful for you as a group.
My next question is around the underused housing tax. Obviously, we've indicated that there's some major loopholes when it comes to this tax. And also, isn't the real issue here is the lack of affordable housing in our country? How important would it be to invest in social housing, affordable housing, housing on First Nations to be able to truly address the housing shortage in our country? I don't know if anyone from the PBO would like to answer.
So I can attempt an answer, Mr. Chair. We have released a report this morning that indicates that for households earning an average income in most urban areas in the country, it's becoming more and more difficult to access housing at the average price. So there is clearly imbalances in the housing market. And we have correlated that with the demographic needs of the country that seem to have gone up since 2015, but have not been matched by an increase in supply. So the increase in the population based on natural increases in the population as well as immigration has not been followed by a commensurate increase in supply, which is leading to increases in prices that are far outpacing the growth in income and the easier affordability due to lower interest rates that we have seen over the last several years. So this leads to difficulty in finding affordable housing for many households. And we have also released a report several months ago about housing on First Nations and multiple programs that have been implemented by the government over the last couple of years on providing affordable housing. And we found that most of the funding has not significantly increased the number of affordable housing units, but rather has increased funding for housing units that are above affordable. So the affordability, the definition of affordability has not been consistent throughout the years, or the definition that the government has used has not been exactly what we normally would find is affordable.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if any of the other witnesses would like to comment on that question briefly as well. Okay, well, with that, thank you to the PBO for your feedback. Coming out of the work of the economic statement as well, obviously, is the need to keep tabs on the kind of financial supports that government put in place during the pandemic. And I would like to put a avis de motion, propose a motion. Obviously, I understand this is not committee business to debate the motion, but I would like to read it into the record that the committee invite the Minister of National Revenue to discuss wrongful abuses of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program from enterprises like airlines and private ski resorts, golf clubs, and others, which recorded record profits and increased revenues throughout the pandemic, to testify whether the beneficiaries of the CEWS devoted the government-provided funds to workers' pay, and reports to this committee what government action was undertaken to ensure that funds were properly devoted to eligible recipients. That is our motion, and we've submitted a translation as well to the chair. And with that, I want to thank the witnesses for their testimony today. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Ashton. And we are moving to the second round, members. And in the second round, we have the Conservatives up for 5 minutes. I have MP Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for that rousing applause from my colleagues here. I do appreciate all of the witnesses appearing today. I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with the committee. Bill C-8 is an important piece of legislation. That is obvious. but I do find it interesting, although my questions will be focused on Bill C-8 primarily, and I'll try to stick to, to the bill as much as I can. It's interesting to me, in a sense, that we're actually meeting today discussing anything but the Emergency Measures Act. Because, I mean, I've been sitting here and I've been thinking this all week, and I'm not sure if it's relevant to the bill, but if it was truly a national security, why was I permitted as a member of Parliament to walk 7 or 8 blocks through demonstrators every evening to get a cab? I mean, if my life was in danger, wouldn't I have armed guards with me, or, a bulletproof vest, or wouldn't they find a different way for me to get home at night? I mean, I have 4 kids, and I'm going to be honest, I walked through that demonstration for 2 weeks now, and I've never, ever felt threatened walking through it. But if it actually is a national security issue, I think it's important that members of Parliament were not at all protected in that situation. I wanted to say that today. The part of the legislation that I'm most drawn to is Part 2, the Underused Housing Tax Act, as it pertains to my role as Shadow Minister for National Revenue. And pairing that with the latest report of inflation from Statistics Canada and the Parliamentary Budget Officer's reaffirmation that home prices are steadily climbing. So I have a great deal of concerns that this is simply a tax grab for the government, which will most likely have zero impact on Canadians being closer to affording a new home. I also have concerns that other countries will simply impose the same tax on Canadians, like, for instance, snowbirds who are already facing 30-year high inflation. So my question is for Mr. Giroux, and I appreciate you being here today. How did you first come to the conclusion that this tax would generate $134 million, while the government was suggesting it would generate $200 million? Obviously, there's a 33% difference between the two, and I was just curious to see how you came up with your number and how it looks today. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So in very brief terms, we looked at the experience in British Columbia, which imposed such a tax, broadly similar, and also subsequently increased it. So we can have a pretty good idea of the behavioral impact of instituting the tax and then raising it subsequently. But Monsieur Perrault can probably give you more complete answer as to how we came up with the estimate.
Sure. I guess for this moment in time, was your estimate concluded to be more accurate than that of the government itself? I mean, they're just 2 different numbers. I just questioned if one was more accurate than the other, I guess, just a general curiosity.
Well, if you ask me, I will tell you that our estimate is better than the one by the Department of Finance.
I had a feeling you'd say that, but I didn't know for sure. I appreciate that. But then again, here's another example of how this government doesn't understand what impact this will have on the financials or for Canadians or their tax dollars. So today's report from the PBO confirms what many Canadians already know firsthand, that the dream of home ownership or an affordable place to live is far out of reach and is worsening under the Trudeau government. Home prices continue to rise every month, and since the Prime Minister came to office, home prices in Canada have nearly doubled. That means the same home that was $300,000 in 2015 is most likely priced at $600,000 today, and a $500,000 home is now reaching $1 million. This failure to address skyrocketing home prices has reached crisis levels after a mere 6 years of government. Home prices in Canada are completely unaffordable to Canadians, and there is no end in sight. For Canadians in Hamilton, Toronto, Halifax, and Ottawa, for instance, home prices are 50% above affordable levels. For Canadians in Vancouver, Montreal, and Victoria, homes are up 45% above affordable levels. The government has had 6 years to fix the issue, and instead they have let it turn into an affordability crisis and continue to refer to it as simply a global phenomenon. Canadians who care about having an affordable place to call home or have hopes of one day owning their own home can't afford more of the Prime Minister's failed leaderships on housing.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome.
That's your time. We're moving to MP Baker from the Liberals for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you very much to our witnesses for being here today with us. I'd like to start by directing my first question to Monsieur Giroux. And we were talking, a number of the members have been asking you about, have been alluding to the vacancy tax in Bill C-8. And you were speaking about a report that I think I heard you say you issued this morning, but forgive me if I got the timing of that wrong. But the report that you issued this morning, and in that report, you were saying that you were explaining the answer to a colleague of mine why you had concluded in your report that housing prices were too high for many Canadians to afford to purchase a home. That's what I heard you say, and that and you'd quantified that. But you also spoke about why that is, why housing prices have grown so much. And I'm wondering if you could explain that again and elaborate on it.
Thank you for your question. So we try to look at what could be driving the increases in house prices. And one area where people usually look to when looking at the demand for housing is household formation, so the demographic factor. Not only do people need somewhere to live, but also they need somewhere to live if there's as the population grows, or people who turn the age where you normally leave your parents' house, there's a greater demand for housing. And we also looked at the supply. So looking at the increase in population, we found that there's an increase in population that's occurred. There's been a faster increase in population since 2015, but the building of new housing, be they apartments or houses, has not kept up with that pace in demographic pressures. So that's very likely a determining factor in increasing house prices. The other aspect is whether individuals and households have more money to spend on housing. And that is indeed the case. The incomes of Canadians have increased over the last several years. At the same time, interest rates have gone down. So for a household looking at what they can afford, the interest rate is a big determining factor in deciding whether to go for a house of a certain price or not, because their monthly payments, the monthly payments they can afford, vary according to interest rates. So we had a confluence of events, rising incomes, lower interest rates, and demographic pressure that has not been matched by an increase in the supply. And that's what has led in many areas of the country to increases in house prices.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Chair, how much time do I have left?
You have about 1 minute and 40 seconds.
1 minute and 40 seconds. Mr. Giroux, in Bill C-8, we see proposed funding, tax credit, et cetera, mechanisms to support a number of things, a number of measures related to COVID. So the ventilation, for example, tests, rapid tests, for example. But this is in my mind, sort of a scaling down of the kind of supports that we saw over the past year and a half to 2 years. Can you talk a little bit about where we were as far as economically, a year ago? Can you talk about how those supports where the supports were, let's say about a year ago, let's say last fall, and then how that compares to what's proposed going forward?
Well, that's an interesting question. I haven't looked at the exact numbers, the pace of government spending, for example, a year ago or 6 months ago compared to now, but there has been a net deceleration in government spending. Not that anybody wants to, but if we go back a year ago, the government was still providing supports for Canadians and businesses at a significantly higher level than what we are seeing now. With the successive waves and the resilience of the Canadian economy, these supports have been withdrawn progressively, either because demand is not there or because some of these programs have expired. So I would say, in a nutshell, that the levels of support have diminished compared to a year, certainly compared to a year ago.
Thank you. Thank you, MP Baker. And we're moving to the block and MP Saint-Marie for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for Professor Taillon and the Underlies Housing Tax Act. We did understand there is a danger that once Ottawa gets involved in property tax, that it stays there. We understand that the court may very invalidate this law because it goes against the Constitution. If the goal of the act is to change behavior, that comes still under provincial jurisdiction. Ottawa should have negotiated with the provinces to come up with a measure, but it seems to have been done unilaterally, thereby making our federation more fragile. Yes. Either this is a disguised tax, so it's really a tax on the Housing Act, and this comes under provincial jurisdiction. Otherwise, if it's a tax, well, I would say I doubt that the objective is to really change the behavior. So you're going to be replacing all of the infrastructure to get involved in property tax, which has never been done in the past. The funding of municipalities, school boards, and provinces is not simple to begin with, and now the federal government is stepping on their areas of jurisdiction. I think this is not a very wise political move because there is no negotiating that's been done. There's no magic solution to housing. Every province has its own strategy. Increasing rents. We've done this in Quebec. We have a strategy for that, but other provinces have not followed suit. The federal government should be there to support provincial strategies, but not to get involved in the regulating of a matter that doesn't come under its jurisdiction. Thank you.
Steve, at the time, thank you, Monsieur Saint-Marie. And moving to the NDP and MP Ashton for 2.5 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to go back to the earlier discussion around housing and appreciate the report that the PBO did release earlier today around that. And of course, what we're saying is some major issues with the underused housing tax. And what we need to do is take immediate concrete action, see the federal government invest in the construction of housing. And I note that in the report, the PBO indicated that the average income earner will find it ever harder to afford a home in the future unless prices drop or wages climb. Would you add to that as well the need for the federal government to directly invest in the construction of housing, particularly social, affordable housing in our communities?
It's quite clear. Well, I assume that the question was directed at me. So it's quite clear that increasing supply is one relatively speaking, easy way to alleviate the pressures on prices and ensure that those who are seeking to enter the market don't face a market that is very, very expensive and it's outpricing them. But whether it's only the federal government's jurisdiction or whether there is also something that municipalities, for example, could do through relaxing some of the requirements they impose on promoters and developers, that's an area that's up for discussion. But for sure, increasing supply, be it through provincial, federal, or municipal action, is certainly something that would alleviate the pressure that households entering the market are facing.
Okay, thank you. And just quickly, the PBO, you've talked about how the government's definition of affordability is an issue as well. So we're wondering, with the current state of inflation and the crisis people are facing, is that going to exacerbate the issues that people are already facing with respect to the housing market?
When StatsCan released its report yesterday, I think, on inflation, it was clear that some components were pushing up prices, gasoline prices, food, but also the dwelling component of the consumer price index. So it is clear that inflation is also present, whether you're renting or in the market to buy a house. So it's not only those who are in the market to buy a house, but also those looking to rent an apartment that are facing increase in prices. And that's reflected in the consumer price index. So that means that inflation is affecting, obviously, dwelling and housing as well. So thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Giraud. MP Ashton, we are moving to the Conservatives, and I've got MP Chambers up for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for taking some time out of your day. I know everyone is very busy, and certainly appreciate you helping us think through C8, and I hope that we also have many of you back to speak with us about other issues. Mr. Cohen from Transparency International, thank you very much for all of your work on money laundering and for your comments on the underused housing tax. I'm wondering if you could discuss for a minute, we had testimony at this committee earlier this week where, the government officials were stressing that this was a revenue-raising measure, and government members were stressing that it was also to do with, helping with, supply in the market and creating more inventory available. My question would be, in what you've seen and the work that you've done on general and money laundering and some of the actors that we see, do you think that a 1% tax on a house will have much impact on the behavior of some money launderers?
Thank you for the question. Without kind of doing an analysis of what the exact right amount is to dissuade people and going into main kind of behavior analysis, I would say at a very basic level, you're looking at what's the cost of doing business, in this case, the business of crime. And when you're talking about laundering millions of dollars, a 1% hit on that could be considered the cost of doing business. So this is why we talk about as well, penalties for money laundering need to be highly substantive and not just seen as the cost of doing business as well, to properly dissuade money launderers from exploiting Canadian housing.
Thank you. I'll take from that it will be unlikely to dissuade money launderers. You mentioned some challenges with the government's implementation of understanding the ownership or the ultimate owner or beneficial owner of housing and what they could do under the current regime. Could you just expand what would your recommendation be to fix that? And do you believe that it would be easy for money launderers to get around the foreign underused housing tax as it currently stands?
As it currently stands, it would be, because they already are getting around any indicators we have as to, or very well, they're getting around indicators of what we have to figure out money or the proceeds of crime or terrorist financing coming into Canada. So as I said in the beginning, and we've seen it, is that sure, you can set up a Canadian incorporated or a company that's incorporated in the federal jurisdiction or in any one of Canada's jurisdictions, but that could have come from money from a separate jurisdiction in a separate secrecy jurisdiction. Somebody could have sold you a Canadian company with the names of directors already available, Canadian directors who are willing to sell their signatures for $200 a signature. So there's a number of ways for money launderers to make it look like they've got full legitimacy of being Canadians. And as I understood reading Bill C8 of the exemptions under Canadian companies, they would wind up coming under those exemptions. So without ultimate beneficial ownership transparency, the government will face, probably wouldn't see the kinds of reactions to the attempt at the tax is trying to achieve immediately. Maybe on people who have licit funds with that are just holding it in property, but for those with the illicit funds, they would most likely find a way around it. Now, I've been talking about the corporate registry. We also need to talk about trusts, which are their whole own legal situation, as well as nominees. So I want to stress that the ultimate beneficial ownership registry is not a silver bullet. There is no silver bullet to money laundering, but it is an incredibly useful tool to the gaps that Canada currently has.
Thank you very much. And you mentioned about the year 2025, and what was significant about 2025? Is that when we expect the registry to come into place, or?
Yeah, as I recall, in the government's proposal in the federal budget in 2021, is that this year Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada are meant to conduct a study on how to implement a publicly accessible registry in Canada, with the idea that such a registry would be up and online by 2025.
Thank you. And thank you, MP Chambers. That's the time. We are moving to the Liberals, and we have MP Chattel for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to our witness. And I must say thank you to Mr. Stewart to agreeing to pursuing or questioning with the C8. I share its sentiment. It is not easy to do that in this context, but so we must. But just want to say I'm grateful to him. I have a question for Mr. Agnew. You mentioned that Bill C8 does a good step forward to our farmers that adjust to the green transition. And you also suggest that more could be done. I'm interested to see what's your view on the impact of this credit, but also what are the extra steps you have in mind?
So I think where the gap is between, what's in Bill C8 versus, what we heard from some of our members in the industries, particularly around the harsh climate, realities of the Canadian agriculture industry. And so, again, grain drying, for instance, is quite important, to make sure that, the products are being dried out properly. You're not having, a spoiled, grain product. Because of our harsh climates in the winter, we need to have heating for livestock. Similarly, you need to have cooling in the summer in many places. And so, if you were to sort of ask people what the ideal situation, would be, I think, the exemptions for, natural gas and propane would be where we would, like to move the conversation. Bill C234, moves it in that direction. So as much as C8 is a first step, there's still that gap to where we've heard members would like things to go. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Staying with you, Mr. Agnew, I have a question on what you think is the impact of our other tax credit for support to air ventilation. One of the main objectives is to keep our school, for example, open in the case of a sustained or endemic in our school or other virus that could circulate. So could you tell us what's the echo from your membership on this credit? How helpful would it be?
So from, I can't speak from the school standpoint, but at least from the business community standpoint, businesses right now, particularly, small and medium-sized businesses, are feeling a lot of inflationary pressures in the economy. And it's sort of the drip feed of every additional cost is another thing that's squeezing the bottom line. And so ventilation is going to be quite important for a number of companies. Again, confidence building measure, people I think are more aware of the need for good ventilation, but that comes at a cost. And so what this tax credit will do is ultimately reduce one of the input costs that a business has to have in order to operate as safely as they would like to.
Thank you very much. I have a question for Monsieur Cohen now. I'm very interested, of course, in the development on beneficial owner, understood on trust. I agree completely. It's an issue. We have to cover trust as well. The requirement for the registry is a good, a good step forward to more transparency. The FATF and the international community is working really hard on these standards, and Canada to match those standards, of course. Now, this new legislation will require the 1% tax on the value of properties if they are owned by non-resident. In this quest to find that information with the tool that the international community now have in Canada registry, would that help finding exactly the money laundering in the real estate market, because that's a big issue?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, it's once we have the registry and if other countries have the registry, and including if the FATF increases the standards on beneficial ownership registry, will this help us find money launderers? I just want to make sure I have it correct.
Yes.
Yes, it will help. I want to repeat, there is no silver bullet, but this is a huge gap, not just in Canada. You have to look at it globally, that a lot of countries are undergoing this problem of our housing markets that are already being crunched on supply, being exploited by those who see new condo developments or new houses as just a safety deposit box for their illicit funds. And it can't just be Canada doing this on its own. So it helps that the Financial Action Task Force is currently looking at updating Recommendation 24 on beneficial ownership transparency so that more countries fall in line with the actions that Canada is taking.
Thank you. And that is the time. Dame Chatel, members, we are moving to the third round. This will be our final round before we take some time for other business. And we have up the Conservatives and Mr. McLean for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome witnesses. And I'm pleased to see a few people that I'm used to seeing at some of these committees. Mr. Giroux, Mr. Perreault, thank you for coming. My first questions do go to you, Mr. Giroux or Mr. Perreault, whichever one of you would like to answer this question. But if you were an investor, I know you're both adept at finance, so if you were an investor in an inflationary environment like Canada has been designed to be by the fiscal and monetary policies of this government, would you accept a 1% tax on a safe investment when you're getting a 28% return per year on Canadian housing investment?
Well, that's a hypothetical question, so I would probably personally decline such a proposition because I probably don't have enough money, but also because it's probably not the promise of great returns.
I'm sorry, Mr. Giroux, what was the last part of that?
It's probably not great returns on that investment going forward, but that should not be construed as providing investment advice.
So, Mr. Giroux, I'm sorry, I'm pulling this out of your report that we received this morning. According to your report, average house price is up 43% in Canada in the last 2 years. And it's up 97% since December 2015, about the time when this government took office. So more or less a double since this government started instituting their housing policies versus the ones that preceded them. Obviously, something's not going right as far as housing affordability goes and the policies associated therewith. But you're telling me that a nominal investor wouldn't accept a 1% tax on a 28% return?
Well, that's based on past returns. Going forward, I'm not sure I would make that investment. And I understood your question that way. So sorry if I misunderstood. Based on past returns, yes, a 1% tax would probably not make much of a difference. But going forward with the increase that's on the horizon in interest rates and the expected relatively slow growth in households' income, And I don't personally think there is that much more room for house prices to go up, but that's just my personal view. And that's based on the mismatch that we have seen, or the delinking of house prices with affordability that average households are seeing. So again, not to be perceived as any type of investment advice.
Yeah, Mr. I appreciate that. And yet the typical house in Canada was 26% increase year over year in December and 28% year over year increase in January. So the inflationary effects are continuing in real assets in Canada. And I would suggest, and you might be able to verify, that it's largely because of fiscal and monetary policies that are leading to an inflationary environment, which is particularly reflected in asset inflation. Would you say that?
That has played a role, and we outline in our report that household incomes have gone up, and in part due to COVID-19 supports. That being said, it's not the only factor, and given that housing markets differ from region to region and from city to city, there's obviously much more than one factor at play. Demographic issues and supply issues are also important factors.
Thank you, Mr. Giroux. I'll move to Mr. Cohen now. And Mr. Cohen, thank you for your testimony today as well. I really appreciated what you referred to as condos being a safety deposit box for illicit funds in Canada. One thing we've seen a strong correlation with is we allow a lot of illicit money to be parked in Canada, as you say, a safety deposit box in Canadian real estate, primarily condominiums. What we've also seen is a rise in crime in the neighborhoods where those properties are being bought. And that crime includes the negative effects, of course, of fentanyl overdoses and other homeless activities that are really affecting the social fabric of this country. Is that something that you look at as a linkage between the illicit money and the nature of the illicit money leading to the nature of societal decline due to higher crime rates and higher addiction because of what flows with illicit money is illicit activity?
There's definitely a link between, using illicit or the mechanisms that money launderers provide to the person committing the crime, because inevitably at the end of the day, you're trying to get that dirty money into the illicit economy. And so something that's been in the news a lot, especially in British Columbia, is this idea of the Vancouver model of money laundering. The idea of money coming over from underground banks in mainland China into Canada, into underground banks, and being used to purchase property. The one thing is, though, that money gets mixed in with things like the fentanyl trade in Canada. So while, yes, there's usually an emphasis on this about the foreign funds, there is illicit funds within Canada that are also being used to move through our property systems or other tools and gaps that money launderers will find.
Thank you. And thank you, MP McLean. And we are now moving to the Liberals, and we've got MP McDonald up for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the guests. I just want to go to Mr. Agnew in regards to your comments on digital service tax and a multilateral agreement with the U.S. Can you just expand on that conversation and tell us what the benefits would be?
So, given the complexities of the digital sort of economy that we're all in, having a single global set of rules is absolutely critical. And so, I think the OECD has done a good job of delivering that. The concern that we have is the current legislative proposals to push forward with a sort of made in Canada digital services tax proposal. I mean, we think the focus should really be on the multilateral deal and implementing that. Another area of concern, I think, with the current legislative proposals would be the retroactive, application. There's a number of things that companies have to do to get ready, and so given we're already a couple of months into the year, and there's going to be a retroactive application back 2 years, certainly would be administratively quite complex to be able to do that.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments too. I mean, I know the benefits where I came from were really forthcoming and well received in small but medium-sized businesses, which is the majority of our businesses in Prince Edward Island. And I'm curious how you what's your performance objectives or indicators that say this is a success or this is a failure? Like, how do you do that from the National Chamber office, just in regards to what worked and what hasn't?
In regards to what specifically? Sorry, I didn't understand.
Was in some of the programs that are initiated by the federal government.
Well, certainly job retention is quite an important, metric. You've heard throughout the pandemic, I think a lot of people speaking about the connectivity between the employer and the employee. And given labor shortages, employers need to retain those connections. And so one of the things that a number of those programs have done is be able to keep workers employed. And so that when we're now in the phase that we're in with things starting to open up, employers aren't having to go back from scratch and compete for talent.
And one question on brought it up around farmers and C8 and climate change, but risk assessments from climate change via financial institutions. Are you hearing anything relevant to banks are going to lending authorities are going to start asking for specific reports relevant to a business, how they're actually participating in climate change or reducing their GHGs? Like, is that going to be, do you believe that'll be a criteria for many of your businesses going forward on accessing money from lending institutions?
That's becoming certainly a bigger and bigger theme, particularly from large institutions that are lending out. One of the things, though, that is becoming a problem is the proliferation of the ways that reporting has to be done, the number of frameworks that have to be done. So, I think as much as the goals are laudable to support, a transition to net zero 2050, we need to have a way that's not administratively overly cumbersome, for businesses. And so that's something that certainly we've heard from a lot of our members.
Thank you. And one other, do you have any numbers on the insolvency in the last 2 years and relevant to, in relationship possibly to COVID-19 or close proximity to that, of businesses across the country?
We do have numbers through the Canadian Survey on Business Conditions. I don't have those to hand, but I would be happy to pass those back through the chair and the clerk to you.
So was there any surprises? Were they higher or lower, or do you have any, in normal circumstances, were incomparable?
I think it's hard to say. We're sort of in an unprecedented, pandemic period. Certainly it's been elevated, but particularly with an emphasis on the travel and hospitality industry, since they've faced the strongest public health restrictions on their ability to operate at capacity.
Okay, so in looking back now, these programs that started out in COVID-19 through the federal government, whether it be CERB or CEWS or what have you, were certainly beneficial to small to medium-sized businesses across the country. Just a quick question, if I could, Chair, on proof of vaccinations. They had a positive effect, I believe, and you tell me otherwise, on small businesses. Now they're being, some of those are being lifted, some of those regulations across the country as well, some of those restrictions. But many businesses are saying that they're going to keep them. So I just want to know what you're hearing.
One of the things that we've heard is the need for actual coordination between the federal and provincial governments in a way that hasn't really been there to date. Businesses don't want to be in the awkward spot of having to be on the front line of the frustration of their customers, if I can put it that way. And so having good messaging coming down from governments, I think, is quite important, so that customers and businesses alike know what the rules are and they know what businesses can and can't do.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, MP McDonald. We are moving to the block, and Monsieur Saint-Marie for 2.5 minutes.
Oui, merci.
Thank you. Professor Taillon, you talked about the fear that this tax is regulatory in nature and that it comes under provincial jurisdiction. According to you, the courts are going to rule on this. In your presentation, I believe I understood that it's better that we act upstream rather than waiting for the court decision. Why would it be beneficial for parliamentarians to come up with a solution before we go ahead with this act. It's much easier. It's much easier to avoid the situation upstream and avoid the situation where the federal fiscal authorities collect different types of taxes, but they're not involved in property taxation. To do so, we're going to have to set up a whole infrastructure, and once the mechanism is set in place, it'll never disappear. So it's better that we anticipate what the problem is, because I would remind you that the federal government cannot regulate housing. It's free to create all the taxes it wants to, but now we have a situation where having a tax in a field where the federal government has never been involved, so there'll be a cost with this. We'll have to collect this property tax, and there's a risk here. If it's not viewed as being a tax, but viewed more as a disguised tax that allows the federal government to meddle into provincial affairs, well, this will all have been for naught. That's very clear. Mr. Chair, I would remind you that we have the Parliamentary Budget Officer who every year presents his report on the fiscal viability and the fiscal capacity of Ottawa and its elbow room, and it's up to it's where the provinces are the ones that are experiencing the long-term problems. So I would ask the Parliamentary Budget Officer whether there is a problem. Yes, I confirm what you have said. In our last viability report, we found that the federal government had some fiscal elbow room. This was last year, but at the provincial level, if we look at the aggregate ability of provinces to move, they had very little elbow room when it comes to fiscal viability. Thank you very much.
And thank you, MP Samari. We are moving to the NDP and MP Blakey for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup et désolé, monsieur.
Thank you. And Mr. Giroux, I was in the House of Commons earlier, and I was participating in the debate on emergency measures. But I would like to ask you, you said that there were problems with the timing of public accounts, and we're talking about a few $1 billion here in C8 for measures and required as a result of the pandemic. I just wanted to know, in the NDP, we feel that it's necessary to have a requirement that the government provide regular reports on its expenditures. What type of information do you think need to be given in these reports to help parliamentarians and Canadians have an idea of how the money is spent? Thank you. That's a good question. I would say off the top of my head that in order to have good reports that inform parliamentarians, the Government of Canada should provide you with good reports. For example, how much each jurisdiction receives from the federal government, and how the money is to be spent. For instance, how many tests were purchased, how many suppliers were using this funding, how many individuals benefited from this federal money, and in which jurisdiction did this take place. Things change over time, but it's important that you as a legislator have a better idea of the effectiveness of these measures and be able to decide whether the money is being used properly and paid in the way for which it was approved. Thank you.
See MP Blakey, and we are moving to the Conservatives, and I've got MP Lawrence for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to discuss a little bit with Mr. Agnew with respect to C8's rebate on propane and natural gas and the carbon tax. So I wanted to go over if we can compare and contrast, of course, the C8 provides a rebate on propane, on carbon tax charge on propane and natural gas, whereas S234 provides an exemption. If you could, and your job is to speak for your members here, and if you could convey, would your members prefer a rebate? Would they prefer a rebate where, depending on, like you said earlier, regional differences, difference in their agriculture practice, they might get anywhere from 30% to maybe 100% depending on it, or would they rather have an exemption where they got 100% of that back?
They would rather have an exemption.
And with respect to equity on a related issue, do you think it would be fairer that all members would get 100% or different members would get different amounts of their exemption back depending on where they live, the type of farming they have?
Well, as a multi-sector association, that's a bit of a pickle for me to answer, as you can imagine. But the answer, I think, from our standpoint, is it does need to take into account, the uniqueness that is in the sector. There's going to be a lot of competing tensions that do have to be balanced, and I do recognize that that's a bit of a non-answer in some ways, but it is a difficult balance to strike in a program that is fitting the most number of circumstances, but that is not overly administratively complex.
The other issue with this is, of course, the carbon tax is there to change behavior. We heard substantial testimony in the Agriculture Committee that many farmers in the grain drying industry, particularly, they just don't have other options. They would love to explore them, but they just don't exist, not at a financial level. Have you heard similar comments to that?
Yes, I have. So, another example I'll give you is switching to alternative fuel sources and electrification. Again, the folks that are out there, they would, if they can electrify and use lower carbon fuel sources, great. But the infrastructure, as the member would appreciate, is just not there in a lot of these rural and remote communities to make that transition.
Thank you. So also, would your stakeholders, would your members prefer to ship their money to Ottawa, let it sit there for anywhere from a couple months to 14 or 16 or 18 months, and then get a percentage of it back, or would they really just keep it in their jeans?
Keep it in their jeans. Folks need to have working capital, in the bank account. And so, money that is going out of the bank account is working capital that they're not able to draw upon.
So if we just sum up the difference between C234 and C8 for farmers with respect to the exemption of the carbon tax on natural gas and propane, C234 will provide a higher recovery percentage, will provide complete equity because 100% will get 100% back. They will also receive that money. In fact, it'll never leave, so they effectively receive it immediately as opposed to waiting up to 2 years for that money. So when I compare those two, my assumption would be that C234 would be a much better option for your members.
We'll take what we can get in the meantime, but certainly working towards C234 is, what we hope can happen.
Perfect. And just getting back to as well, because there aren't options for many of your farmers, and I live in a rural area, the rebate will not, and I'm open to your comments, but in my opinion, will not provide any greater behavioral modification because the cost of making those behavior modifications, like grain dryers, there just isn't the technology to do it any other way but with carbon. So your comments on that, Mr. Agnew?
Again, this kind of goes back to the infrastructure, piece of just not having it there for, again, high degrees of electrification. The other thing I would say, to go back to your earlier point about working capital, these are capital investments that people have to make to get the infrastructure on location, and so if they don't have the capital, in their genes, to pick up the honourable member's expression, they're not going to be able to deploy it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Do you have any more time? I see you're taking mute off there, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, you've got about 10 seconds. So just.
I'll just thank the witnesses and for the chair for his great work.
Great, thank you. And we are moving to our final questioner, and it's the Liberals, and we've got MP Zarowitz. You are up for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank everyone for the important conversation today. I will be directing my questions again to Mr. Agnew. Mr. Agnew, Part 5 of C8 is related to the COVID-19 Proof of Vaccination Fund, and it is to ensure that the Government of Canada continues to support provinces and territories in implementing proof of vaccination by introducing the Proof of Vaccination Fund. So my question to you is, if you go across the country, there's different provinces that are that are making different decisions around the vaccine passport. And so my question to you is, how important do you still think it is for us to continue to have this type of a fund?
It is important, and I'll explain that because even if tomorrow every province and territory across the country decided they were no longer going to require proof of vaccination to get into a business establishment, there's the reality of international travel. Many foreign jurisdictions require fully vaccinated, a fully vaccinated status for a traveler into a country, and as well too, we still require full vaccination in order to be exempt from certain quarantine and testing requirements. And so, even if we're not going to need them domestically, there's still an international use case for them. And I think for that reason alone, we have to make sure that the provinces are having the funding they need for the infrastructure, because we made the decision in this country to not have a single, federal government-run vaccine registry.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate you mentioning that. And I think the other thing that comes out once in a while is we don't really know how COVID will evolve. We think it's sort of nearing its end because we'd like to believe that Omicron sort of looks like it's weaker, but one really doesn't know how it's going to evolve and whether we do need to, for some reason, reestablish that quite quickly across the country. Would you agree with that?
Certainly, I hope we're not going to have to, introduce restrictions, but in a non-linear path is probably the best way to describe what the pandemic has been like in our country and around the world.
Mm-hmm. And my second part of and it's still related to this vaccination fund, it says that the Minister of Health will determine what apportionment of funds across provinces and territories and the requirements for provinces and territories to access funding. Would you might not have any advice in this area, but would you have any advice in this area in terms of the requirements to sort of access funding, or is that just sort of beyond sort of where the mandate of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce is?
It would be mostly beyond the mandate. I think the one piece I would suggest that it does happen is that we continue to have at least the single QR code. So although the registries are still held at the provincial level, we do need to have something that is interoperable and also recognized internationally. The worst thing that could happen is if we had 13 separate pieces of paper that we have to go to other jurisdictions and get them to wrap their heads around.
And then maybe in just my final minute that I have left, all of C8 is all about us trying to move into the post-COVID world and restarting our economy. The minister, one of the things that we hear a lot from small businesses is their need to actually fulfill their labor shortages. We have introduced sort of a record, a historic amount of new Canadians that we're hoping to introduce for the next 3 years, 1.3 million into Canada. Do you think that's something that will be useful and helpful? And is there something more that you think we could be doing to help to fill the labor shortages?
Yes, I mean, it is something that'll get us towards addressing these. If you're talking about in the context of the immigration system, one of the things that we've been talking about is a trusted employers program for temporary foreign workers. If you're a company that is a repeat user of the program, the administrative burden, we argue, should be less on you because you're a nexus program, if you will, for temporary foreign worker program users. And so that's something that we would encourage the government to take up.
Thank you very much. I think that's my time.
Okay, well, thank you, MP Zarowitz, and it's time. It's time also to thank all of our witnesses. Thank you for your remarks, your testimony, your answers to our questions on C8. On behalf of the members, the clerk, the analysts, the staff, the interpreters, and I hope I'm not forgetting anybody, but we thank you very much for coming before our committee. And so we will let the witnesses go at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk, just let me know when all the witnesses are off. They look to all be off. Okay, thank you, Clerk. And members, so MP McLean had asked to discuss a motion that he had sent. I believe it was distributed, Clerk, to everybody in both official languages. And so we will, and I do see a hand up, MP Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but Mr. McLean requested this, so I put up my hand to defer, but I will defer to him, please.
Okay, great. Okay, so I've got MP McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We forwarded the motion. We spoke with the clerk 2 days ago. We missed the deadline by 16 minutes as far as submitting this for debate today, but it is an emergency that the country is facing right now. There's an emergency act we're debating in the House of Commons. Part of that emergency act, of course, implicates the Canadian financial system and what's going to happen to the security of our monetary system with the government, I think haphazardly, but we can determine that, allowing or enforcing banks to actually come and freeze the accounts of people that it thinks are involved with any of the blockades, protests, et cetera, that are happening in Ottawa. When I asked the question at the briefing the other night, of course, the officials told me that the banks have algorithms to make this happen. And I think the use of a blunt tool like a blanket algorithm to freeze Canadians' bank accounts will have significant effects on our Canadian financial system, including the drifting of deposits from banks to other financial instruments that are not Canadian deposits. There's a lot that is going on here, and I recognize that. I think this committee is well equipped to deal with the effects of what might happen with this, and we should examine that very clearly and very quickly. And part of this motion, if you'd like me to read it, Mr. Chair, I could, but I think it is in front of everybody, and I think it would be respecting everybody's time if we just talked about the nature of what we need to accomplish here and let everybody read the motion itself, and it stands on its own. We're open to some amendments on it. As a matter of fact, we'd like to make some amendments ourselves because of the timing of this committee and what we know we need to get done. And part of the reason we bring this forward, Mr. Chair, is to manage all the studies we have in front of this committee. We think this one should probably bounce to the top because of how urgent this actually is, and we should be dealing with this quickly. Expeditiously, we could say that C8, we're all expecting to have our amendments to C8 in by next Friday, and then go clause by clause Monday the 28th on it, and I think we're all okay with that. Perhaps we've seen enough witnesses for that, and we can allocate 2 meetings next week for the first part of this study, including the witnesses we're calling here, and that would be, I think, very instructive for the Canadian people and for the Canadian financial system. So I'll leave it at that. I'm open to any questions that people might have as far as what I think this committee needs to accomplish on behalf of Canadian people and ensure that we're not overstepping and causing some significant harm to the Canadian financial system.
Thank you, MP McLean. Now MP Beach, then MP Blakey.
Yeah. Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank my friend opposite for raising this motion. He's right, it was outside of the 48-hour period, and just even if it was 46 hours ago, we only received it this morning. But the Emergency Measures Act is certainly important. It's something that I think we can all agree that should be studied. And it's just going to be a matter of all of us agreeing how we're going to study that, how we're going to scope out this motion. and how we're going to deal with the timing, which are all issues that my friend just outlined. The intent of the motion, and I don't know what amendments my friend opposite is referring to, but the initial intent of the motion, as worded in the initial motion, is to start before March 3rd. I am guessing that there are members of this committee that would like to see it start even before that, or significantly before that. And I think that it would be worth us considering, especially given how much time is left in the day, about potentially utilizing something in this committee that we haven't done thus far, which is to utilize our subcommittee to make sure that we can prioritize all of the current business, including this motion and the finalized wording of this motion. I'll remind my colleagues that we do have C8, current legislation, in front of this committee with agreed upon timeline from this committee. With this motion, we have an additional request for the Deputy Prime Minister to appear in addition to the current request for the Deputy Minister to prepare for C8, and I think we all want that to continue to happen. Just our last meeting, we included a new invite, or not a new invite, but an updated invite with a new timeline for the Governor of the Bank of Canada. And I think everyone here thinks it's important that pre-budget consultations are done on a timeline that all of the substantial testimony that we've heard to date and everything that's been written and received by this committee can be not only put into a final report, but received on a timeline that it can be duly considered to be part and to be impactful, to be positively impactful with regards to this year's budget. So given that this is a substantial and appropriate motion that I think everyone here wants to study, and given that it's not just us who have amendments, but, sorry?
I am, yes, MP Beach, and I apologize for the interruption. I just, the clerk just informed me that we do have 10 minutes max. Clerk, that means what, how many more minutes so that we have to get this meeting done?
We have until 5:40 before we start impacting other meetings tonight.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe I could, without giving up the floor, and I don't know if this is possible, but maybe I could ask my friend if that course of action is agreeable to him. And if so, then we don't have to worry that we have a deadline of 10 minutes. But given that he has amendments, we have amendments, I guess my other colleagues have amendments. Let's get to the subcommittee, we can get this all sorted out and get to this motion expediently.
Okay, I've got MP Blakey, and I don't know if MP McLean wanted to just respond to that.
Perhaps I can respond after MP Blakey.
Okay, MP Blakey.
Sure. So just a few things. One, I want to thank Mr. McLean for bringing this motion forward. I think, it is a really extraordinary time, and the government is taking some extraordinary measures. And I think it's appropriate that we as parliamentarians provide oversight, and that oversight begin as quickly as possible. So, for my part, what I would just kind of add to our understanding of this study, and I'm not sure even that we need an amendment for what I'm looking for. I note that in the motion already, it says any other issue or topic related to the extension of powers or their effect on the Canadian financial system by the invocation of the Emergency Measures Act. What I'm concerned about, and we've seen this sometimes in cases where extraordinary powers have been granted, are that police may pass on to financial institutions the names of people that have nothing to do with the convoy, which is the justification for the invocation of emergency measures, but they might have people on watch lists for other political causes, and see this as an opportunity to flag them, to get information about them, to pass on information about them. And I think it's really important that we as parliamentarians endeavor in our study to add that to our oversight work and look for reassurances, not just reassurances, but actually kind of concrete accountability mechanisms to make sure that law enforcement aren't taking this as an opportunity to cast a wide net, but are respecting the very limited scope of the powers that they've been granted under the the government's declaration of emergency powers. So that's something that I would just like to be part of our understanding of the study. If there's no objection by any members of the committee, I mean, I would take that to be understood as part of the study under Section 7. Otherwise, I'd be happy to seek to amend it. But I think that's an important part of our oversight work. So that's on the substance of the motion. On the process, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be able to vote on this today in terms of something that we need to move forward with. I think if we want to try and meet as early as next Tuesday on this matter, it's important that we settle it. So, you know, if we have agreement from the committee that this is what we want to study, then I'm happy to have a subcommittee meeting to do the real work of figuring out how to work that into the schedule and how it interacts with the other priorities that we've already identified. This clearly, I think, has to be the priority given that it pertains to emergency measures in an emergency. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to get to this right away. If we can't deal with this and get an approval for the study right away, I mean, the other option would be to have an emergency meeting of the committee in order to discuss this motion and get it approved so that we're on our way. So subcommittee definitely for planning, but I don't think we need a subcommittee meeting. And in fact, the subcommittee can't adopt this as a study for the committee. So we do need the committee to say this is something that we want to study. And then the subcommittee can meet to decide how we study it and when we study it. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Blakey. I did get a alert here from the clerk, just that MP Zerowitz has her hand up in the room. And then I've got, after that, I see MP Beach's hand is up. So MP Zerowitz.
Thank you so much. And I think we're all in agreement. This is an urgent and important study for us to undertake. Mr. Beach.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. It's just I had understood you were going to let me speak after Mr. Beach.
Oh yes, I did say that you could. Yes. Please.
I'm sorry. After Mr. Blakey.
After MP Blakey.
Sorry about that, Mrs. Zerowitz.
That's right. You asked to speak after MP Blakey to MP Beach's comments. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, the only amendment we're looking at in this, just for clarification, Mr. Beach, is the date. We'd like the date to start next week. And as I say, there's, I think, some accommodation we'd like to make on this as far as what's happening with C8. And calling the minister on C8 would be something we would yield on here in order if we can have her here for this study as opposed to C8 and move past all the hearings, the rest of the hearings we had scheduled on C8. There's obviously going to have to be some give on some of the issues that are before us, and that is an issue I think we can give on, having other witnesses. We'd still like to have the governor of the Bank of Canada here when he was scheduled to be here because it's the only time we can get him here, so that we'd like to stick in the agenda. However, we'd like to start on this study next week. When we initially drafted this motion, of course, we were thinking that we couldn't accommodate around C8, and we've decided that we'd let that whole process go. I think most of the amendments that we've discussed are going to be submitted by the 25th anyways, and we can do line by line according to the schedule that you've set previously, so there'll be no compromise as far as getting that through the House. That accommodates that, but I do think this is something that's a heightened awareness for all of Canadians and what this means for their financial system and the way their banks are treating them. So I would like this to move forward as quickly as possible and hopefully get a vote on it today. So and I appreciate Mr. Blakey as well in accommodating, I think his concerns in with the motion we have here today. So the one amendment, of course, is no later than Thursday, March 3rd. Of course, that would be Tuesday. That's part B. So it would be Tuesday, February, is that the 22nd? I think so. That'd be it.
Good. Thank you, MP McLean. And we do have MP Zerowitz and then MP Beach.
I'll say mine very quickly, and then I think Mr. Beach is just going to finish off what I have to say. So urgent and important, I think we're unanimous on that. We do have lots on the go, as Mr. Beach has very well articulated. We also have amendments to this motion. I think that, for the most part, will be favorable. But I think that's going to take some time, which we don't have. Is there a way that we could agree in principle with the study, already start and gather witnesses to start on Tuesday, and then have that emergency meeting that Mr. Blakey had talked about to sort of organize all the timing and maybe finalize the wording of this particular motion. So that's what I'm putting on the table in terms of suggestion. Then I'll get Mr. Beach to sort of finish up.
Thank you, MP Zerowitz. MP Beach.
I'll defer if the committee is willing to go forward with Mrs. Zerowitz's suggestion, then I'll defer to that.
Thank you, MP Beach. MP Blakey.
Sure. Maybe just a modification to Ms. Zerowitz's proposal, which is that we vote on this motion and we pass this motion for the study. We add to the subcommittee's agenda an item about the scope of the motion, and then the subcommittee could discuss some of these other amendments and make a recommendation to the committee that it could then adopt or refuse at the next meeting of the committee. But at least passing this study motion in its current form would allow us to begin reaching out to witnesses, and then it would allow for some of the discussion that needs to happen around the scope to happen at the subcommittee. And then when the full committee next deals with this, it can deal with it having the benefit of the subcommittee having hashed out some of the issues and proposing a kind of unified and concrete recommendation for what it would look like going forward.
Okay. Thank you, MP Blakey. MP Beach.
So we can't agree to vote on this motion with some of the language without actually addressing some of the language that's in it. But what we can agree to, if Mr. Blakey is amenable and if the other members opposite are amenable, is to proceed with, in principle, with the study, call some of the witnesses that are on this list to appear on Tuesday, and defer the motion to the subcommittee for the final text to be confirmed at the earliest possible meeting time.
MP Beach has put that out there. I don't know if MP Blakey.
I mean, I'm certainly open if that means less delay in getting on with the study. Perhaps this is a question for the clerk. Just curious about authorizing, like having witnesses and then incorporating them later into a study, like a study that we authorize after we've had some witnesses. I think that can be done if we're all on the same page, but I'm wondering if it creates some administrative difficulty for you to be trying to get witnesses to committee for a study that does not yet have any authority out of the committee.
Clerk.
Well, first of all, on the public notices of meetings, the study is mentioned on the notice itself. So if witnesses are invited to appear on a notice, on a public notice, the study will have to be there on the notice. So we can't, unless we just put committee business in general and then have witnesses, that's a possibility, but it's very, I've never seen that before.
Okay. Thank you, Clerk. MP Beach.
So I think we can correct for that by stating that we are starting a study on the Emergency Measures Act, and that we will invite and we can name the favorite witnesses that are already included in this motion. And in addition, we will have a subcommittee meeting to finalize the scope of the fullness of the study immediately. That way the name can be on the title of the meeting. We can invite some of the people that are here. We can start on Tuesday. We can finalize our amendments at subcommittee without delay.
Thank you, MP Beach. And Clerk, yes?
Mr. McLean wanted to speak, sir.
Oh, sorry, I did not see. Okay. Mr. McLean, MP McLean, yeah.
So perhaps the motion says at the bottom, with agreed amendments, with amendments that will be agreed to at the subcommittee that's being held on Friday, February 18th.
Is that directed to, I guess, MP Beach or?
Well, as long as it doesn't mean pass, yeah, as long as that is on the short version of the motion that I just proposed and not the full motion in itself, because we would not be in favor of passing the full motion itself, subject to potential amendments. If we can have a shorter version, get some of those people started and finalize the wording of this motion at subcommittee, that's what we're proposing. And we would literally start the study on Tuesday, but we'd have an opportunity to shake out this language to everybody at subcommittee.
Point of information, Mr. Clerk, not order.
Point of information, yeah.
But so my question is, I'd like to vote on this today, but we don't have to vote on this today, do we? Mm-hmm. It's on the floor, but it didn't get official notice, though. What I'm trying to...
Well, no, but because we added committee business to the end, and the chair agreed, it's now on the floor, so I don't know. That would be
Yeah, my thing is just we're about to end because another committee is about to throw us out. So we have a decision as to whether or not it's going to be what Mr. Beach has proposed. And we start on Tuesday. And we figure out the language sort of in that subcommittee emergency. Or we don't have agreement.
Clerk, how much time we have left? 0 time. Okay, MP.
Let's all come together, McLean.
So are we, can we have the vote, please?
Well, no,
Well, there's
because
still
because I would
discussion
have
going.
amendments if there was a vote, and I would start moving those amendments.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, MP Blakey.
It's been my experience from time to time on certain committees that when committee meetings run long, I recognize we're interfering with the business of another committee. But I have to say that in light of the subject matter and the obvious importance of the timing, given that it pertains to the government's invocation of emergency measures, and given that this is one of the most senior committees of the House of Commons, I think it is important that we get this sorted. And my understanding of it is that if a committee continues to meet, it does bump the other committee. So while I don't think that that's something we want to do with any regularity, I think given the seriousness of the subject matter and an apparent lack of consensus on a way forward, that our meeting should continue.
Okay, MP Blakey, I think I don't know if that's a question for the whips or for them to look at that. But I'm looking to the members again. Anybody, and also to the clerk. We're really running up against the other committee. MP Beach.
I would just say to all of my friends at this committee, I've always followed through on everything that I've said. We are making this offer in good faith. We want to get to this. We want to get it done. And I would just stress to other members that if we can come to this agreement, we're good to go and we can get this thing done faster than if we're delayed. And I'm making this offer in good faith, and I hope we can work together on this.
Clerk?
Mr. McLean.
I think it's Mr. McLean that has his hand up.
Sorry, MP McLean, I apologize.
And I accept good faith, and that's why I said that subject to any changes to this motion that will be heard and agreed to at the subcommittee held on Friday, February 18th. So I do think it is something we need to have as an official motion to move this forward, and let you say this is good faith, and I think we've established it amongst all parties here to make this work. And if there's more witnesses we need to call, or if there's something that might be deemed inappropriate in here from what we need to look at, then we can hash that out tomorrow. But I haven't seen any of Mr. Beach's proposed amendments at this point in time. So if we could incorporate Mr. Beach's last codicil, if you will, at the bottom that says, subject to subsequent amendments that arise at the subcommittee hearing on February 18th, I would be all in favor of making sure that his concerns are accommodated at that meeting.
MP Beach?
It just puts us in this impossible position where we are supporting a motion that we don't support without amendments. I mean, if we have the time, I could start going through the amendments. But I've been told that we don't have the time. So that's why I'm trying, and I wasn't aware that we weren't going to have the time. That's why I'm trying to push this forward so that we can actually take the proper time, go to the subcommittee, figure this stuff out, and I'm sure it'll be fine. But to support a motion, what if we don't come to agreement at the subcommittee, and then we have this motion sitting on the table that we don't agree to? You see the problem from our side?
I do, yeah.
Have them rattle enough. 3 seconds.
MP McLean.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, if the wording is very broad here, and it's not meant to be punitive, or if there's something that he thinks shouldn't be in here, if he can put that on there as opposed to just specific wording we have to agree to. If we look at a broad scope that he wants to limit here or not have as part of this study because he thinks it's ultra virus, this committee, then we can discuss that very quickly right now.
Okay. And I see MP Zerowitz's hand up. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we can't force a vote here. And what we are agreeing right now is we're offering to an official motion to start the study on Tuesday, study on the Emergency Measures Act, with the list that's been provided, and then we can discuss the actual motion details at subcommittee.
Can we go back to Mr. Beach and he can give us a substance of what might not be acceptable here?
I am happy to get into the amendments, but what I don't want to have happen is us get cut off in the middle of me having amendments, and then this study gets delayed. So before I'm happy to start getting into the amendments, I need to seek guidance from the clerk to make sure that we're just not going to get cut off and kicked out of this meeting.
Clerk.
The reality is that we have stretch resources tonight. The House is sitting late, and there are more meetings tonight, and that the whips will have to decide if Finance keeps meeting, and if so, which other meetings are canceled. That it's really the whip's decision.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah, I see. I saw Madame Chatel, and then I saw Mr. Blakey. You put your hand up instead of your virtual hand, but that's all good. Okay, Madame Chatel, MP Blakey.
Thank you. Just if it's in case it's a lack of trust here, MP Beach could go quickly on the amendment that I feel that myself I advance. And just just then agreeing that we'll discuss those amendments and that we'll have the short version for now, but it's nothing. It's very anyway. Sorry, I'm trying to with the English version just to read it. We just had it, but look, if we just on a high level explain what are the changes that we want to put forward, and then agreeing that we'll discuss those changes and agree with the text of the motion, and at the meantime have the short version so that way we can start on Tuesday. And it's constituency week, so we'll have to agree to the time now. Sorry, we rush in time.
My apologies. Sorry, I was muted. Yeah. So MP Chatel is done. MP Blakey, and then clerk? Yes.
Mr. Baker also wants to speak.
And MP Baker after MP Blakey.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I guess just a couple thoughts. One is that I do hope that the whips are talking in the event that we do need extra time. So I've endeavored to reach out on that front to make sure that my people at least are aware of the need for some discussion outside or around this table in order to get us more time if that's what we need. I'm not sure that I like the precedent, but I also recognize that we're in that we are in an extraordinary time, and I think the proceedings of the House today affirm that in no uncertain terms. So one other option that I think I would only want to proceed with if everyone, and I mean everyone at the table, is comfortable with it, would be to empower the subcommittee to adopt a study motion in respect of the financial aspect of the Emergency Measures Act. That would mean that if we did have a subcommittee meeting tomorrow, representatives from each party would be able to discuss, negotiate, and determine the scope of that study. So any amendments that members from any side have could be considered at that time, and we could vote on it, and the study could be approved before the end of the day tomorrow if the committee is willing to delegate its authority to the subcommittee. I don't think that that would make sense as a best practice or a precedent, but I think that given that it's pertaining to emergency measures, and given that the pandemic and the hybrid format that the pandemic has necessitated is creating some artificial time constraints, that this is one way of trying to get around those. But so I would look to Mr. McLean and Mr. Beach and Monsieur Saint-Marie to see if that might be acceptable to them. I'm prepared to stay as long as the whips will let us, in order to deal with amendments, if that's what it takes in order to get a study motion approved that will provide the proper authority for the clerk to invite witnesses and to set up a meeting early next week on this matter.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, MP Blakey. I do have MP Beach. I don't know if anybody on the floor has their hand up, clerk, but I've got MP Beach up next.
So, like my friend, willing to stay here and go through amendments if we get the time from the whips. Also willing to accept his proposal. Also a little nervous about the precedent of that, but extraordinary times. Also willing to continue to go forward with our initial proposal. So I would really leave this in the hands of our colleague from the Conservatives and our colleague from the Bloc to see what their preference is. But I think either of those solutions would work for us. The one just proposed by Mr. Blakey, or the one that we previously proposed.
Okay, thank you, MP Beach, and I apologize, MP Baker. I know you had your hand up on the floor. I was alerted by the clerk. My apologies. You have the floor.
I'll allow Mr. McLean to respond. Just easier to continue the discussion if Mr. McLean responds.
Thank you. And I would there's a spirit in here that has you'll see in the motion that does look at what we're supposed to be doing here, and I don't want to lose any of that in our discussions at the subcommittee. It is what I think Canadians are expecting us to look at here, and the impact on their financial system. There's nothing in here that I think detracts from what we should be looking at as far as Canada's House of Commons Finance Committee and the impacts of something that's never been done before. So I think it's wide open, and I would go back to my proposition to you that subject to, this is the spirit. This is a motion that has a spirit of, let's look at this very quickly, please. And if there's something that we're missing or some detail that needs to be changed, then let's please put there as an amendment at the bottom that says, subject to changes that will be agreed upon between parties at a subcommittee meeting on February 18th. I think we're covering it all. I haven't heard what the substantial principal concerns are about the words that are on the page here. It is really about examining what this means to the Canadian financial system and Canadians going forward.
Okay. So I had MP, is it MP Baker?
Yeah. Thanks very much. I mean, I think, and maybe I think we have a couple of options, right? We can go with what Mr. Blakey suggested, which I thought was practical, right? It allows us to move. I think the goal is that we all share is to move forward on this expeditiously. So we all share that goal, I think. One way to do that, I think that from my perspective makes sense, is what Mr. Blakey suggested. It allows us to move forward by Tuesday. It allows the subcommittee to iron out all these details, scheduling issues, prioritization issues, wording of amendment issues, that sort of stuff. The other approach would be to do it here in committee now, to work through the amendments now. I think there's a few problems with that for us. One is I just don't think in general that's the most efficient way to work through, or we're going to have to work through. Let's be honest, there's a schedule that we need to look at and figure out how this jives together, and having all of us sit here doing that, I don't think is the most efficient way to begin with. So a subcommittee would be a great way to approach that, I think, just practically speaking. And it would also, by happenstance, also allow another committee that's supposed to be meeting with other colleagues to meet as well. So I prefer Mr. Blakey's proposal to how we move forward on it. if we have to start moving amendments now, we can do that. I'm happy to do that. I just think, Mr. McLean, I would ask, for your understanding, and that it's hard for us to vote on the language of a motion that we haven't had a chance to amend yet, right? And I think the spirit here, I think what you're hearing from Mr. Beach and myself, all of us, like, we want to do the study. There's not an opposition to doing the study. That's not the issue. But I think the specific language, it's difficult for us to approve something that we know we want to amend. And so I'm just asking for us to find a way to, let's move forward with the study, but let's find a way to amend it as we move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. I do see MP Samari, and then I do see MP McLean's hand also went up. Yep.
I'll be very brief. It's good that we start this as quickly as possible, so I agree with Mr. Blakey. If the clerk can confirm that such a thing is possible, we understand this is an exception to the rule, but given the circumstances, it's justified.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Saint-Marie, and I apologize, Mr. MP McLean, and then MP Lawrence, I believe, clerk, is that correct? After that? Yes, okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will go back to Mr. Beach because I think the issues of substance are his to raise at this point in time. As you can see that the rest, Mr. Baker, we've already talked about when this meeting would start. But the issues of substance are the A, 1 to 6, about what we're trying to accomplish here. And if there's something in the spirit of that motion that needs to change immediately, then I would entertain that right now. But if there's something that you don't like with the spirit of that, then I think you should put that on the floor, because this is what we're trying to get at here, is how does this work? How does it impact the financial system of Canada going forward? So I'm opening the floor to you to tell me what principle you think needs to change in that first 6 points of language after A.
Yeah. Okay. So happy to address that. Just very concerned about time, and I don't want to get cut off. So, Mr. Clerk, where are we currently at with time? Because I don't want to get into discussing amendments and then get cut off. Because now we've had all members from every party except the Conservatives agree to Mr. Blakey's proposition. So what we could do is move to table debate on this motion and then move a new motion to take on Mr. Blakey's proposition. And I assume that motion would pass because we have a majority to be able to do that. But Mr. Clerk, I want to get into timing, and I want to do this in a way that everybody agrees, because I want people leaving this meeting feeling good about the way we're moving forward on this motion that we all want to do.
Sorry, MP Blakey. Oh, did I have MP? Sorry, I apologize. Did I have? Was MP Lawrence up?
I was, but I'll yield to Mr. Blakey. I think I know what he's going to say. So,
thank you, MP Lawrence. MP Blakey.
We have a telepath on the committee that this could be an important resource going forward. What I wanted to say is that, and as I said earlier when I presented this as a possible alternative, I'm really only comfortable with doing that if we have unanimous consent. I think that's really important. I'm not prepared to bring the hammer down on this. I think we do need to deal with this in a timely way. It is a national emergency. These are extraordinary powers. It is appropriate for the Finance Committee to provide this oversight. I respect that some members may want to change some of the wording around this, and certainly open to suggestions, but I'm satisfied with the motion as it stands. If we're not going to vote on it today as a means of concluding this meeting, then I think we all have to be agreed on the path forward. That's certainly my position, and I won't be voting in a way to override anyone's wishes on the committee if we don't have a consensus.
MP, was it MP Lawrence is up, or MP, and then MP Beach?
Thank you very much for that clarification. That was what I thought you were going to say, MP Blakey. So maybe I am a telepath there. But what I would, I guess the challenge I have is that if we don't leave here with an agreement to have at least the study that we've agreed upon on those details, we don't know what'll be those amendments, right? So I know you're doing this in Mr. Beach. I know you're doing this in good faith, but you don't know where we'll be on that, and so we could get into an impasse there, not of anyone acting in bad faith, but until we know what those amendments are. So if you have those amendments with you, could you get us at least high level, whether we debate them or not tonight? That can be discussed.
I'm happy to. I'm just waiting for the chair to tell me.
Yeah, MP Beach. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, I'm happy to give you the high level, and if we have time, we can break into the individuals. Would like to add some language into the study around examining the economic impacts of the blockades. Would also like to add some additional witnesses. Would like to modify the language around the appearance of the minister. Would like to look at some of the language around the timing, including potentially moving it up, which I think you guys have already talked about, and changing some of the language in some of the statements. And there's a lot of these changes that are not changing, I think, the intent of the motions, but perhaps, and nor the scope, but perhaps adding to it. That would be the intent of the high level of the amendments that I'm currently looking at, and literally would be willing to go through all of these things if we had the time today, and happy to go through them all at subcommittee as well.
Thank you, MP Beach. Is there any hands up, clerk, in the room?
Yes, Mr. McLean wants to speak.
Yeah, MP McLean.
As I've said, Mr. Beach, in good faith, we're letting a number of issues go with regard to C8 and the minister's appearance for that purpose. We're compromising here as effectively as we can as far as moving something forward that Canadians are very concerned about right now. And if there's extra language and extra things you'd like to add, I think that is very well covered in what I suggested was the amendment we put at the bottom here, that and subject to any amendments that will be arranged at a subcommittee to be held of the subcommittee of this committee to be held on February 18th. It didn't sound like there was much there except potentially excluding the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance from appearing. That seemed like it was outside of the scope of what we've already put on the table here. We know this may not be complete. We know there may be other people that we add, and the language is open to accommodate that from all parties. So, in a spirit of goodwill, if you can pass this with the opportunity to amend at the subcommittee, I think we're all the way home.
MP Beach.
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, no intention at all to remove the Deputy Prime Minister. The Deputy Prime Minister, I'm sure, would be happy to attend and speak to these matters. So please don't interpret some tweaks to the language on her appearance to be that we don't want her to appear. I think we should have her appear. But the fundamental problem, and I don't think anybody on this committee from any party would want to be asked to agree to a motion that they don't agree with, subject to future amendments that might not happen, because that's going to set into motion things that, without future agreement, I guess would continue to proceed in the matter that is listed in this motion. So the alternative that I've suggested is the opposite of that. It says, let's take those elements that we know we can approve today, which is that we are going to have the study, that we are going to invite some of those witnesses, and between now and Tuesday, we are going to have a meeting to finalize this language, which is basically just acknowledging that we don't have the time at this meeting and giving us the time at the subcommittee to accomplish it.
that is less problematic than what you're proposing, which is to make us agree to a motion that we don't necessarily agree with 100% of the language on.
MP McLean.
Oh, thank you. And Mr. Beach, I appreciate what you've said. And I'm willing to, scribble out parts of these words that you might find difficult. And if the issue on the Deputy Prime Minister still attending is a definite on this, which we think it should be, then we can take out the part that's offensive in that part of it very quickly here. If the number of meetings is a problem, then we can amend that as you see fit right here very quickly. We can amend the logistics of this as far as when we meet, but our initial focus, of course, is to have the first 2 meetings next week. So there's not much logistically here that I think we're stuck on. We need to get this motion moving forward, and I think that has to happen here today.
MP Beach.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I can move the motion. I mean, I feel like the longer we talk about this, I feel silly for not just moving the amendments when we started a while ago.
Move the amendments. We move the amendments.
The amendments, Terry.
Yeah. All right. So can I move my first amendment? Okay. So I would like to move an amendment, Mr. Chair.
Terry, just go through them, and we'll just kind of pencil them in or scratch some out as we go through this.
Sure. So the first is under the study examine, to add a new section that would state the financing of the illegal blockades, and the impacts of these blockades on the Canadian economy and Canadian workers. I would so move.
Yeah. Okay. Clerk's advising me. Let me take a look. Okay. Thank you, Clerk. Yep. MP McLean.
On
the amendment?
Yes, on the amendment. Mr. Beach, I think it's clear that these blockades, these illegal blockades, had an impact on the Canadian economy. And, this is post facto. We know we've lost hundreds of millions of dollars of trade because of this. What we're looking at here is how do we make sure that what we're doing going forward isn't going to negatively affect the Canadian financial system. We already know what's happened. Let's go forward with not an analysis, but what is going to happen if we do this. That is the scope of this study.
I see. Yeah, Clerk.
And Mr. Lawrence has been wanting to speak for a little while.
Oh, I apologize. Okay, MP Lawrence.
No worries. I still love you, Mr. Chair.
MP Beach.
The other thing that I was going to is I understand this exact issue is actually being studied by Public Safety in another committee, so it would be redundantly redundant to study it here.
Okay, MP Beach.
Yeah, so I actually don't think it's redundant. I think that this is actually an important aspect of this very important study for a number of reasons. Let's also not forget that there is an entire different committee that is going to be struck to examine emergency measures. It's going to be made up of parliamentarians, and it's going to examine the full scope of these measures. And I hope that this study could help positively contribute to that discussion. But with regards to the financing of the legal blockades, I think it is important to understand how we came to have these emergency measures in the first place and what exactly has been happening on the ground. And then realizing who is affected by these measures and how. If we don't understand the people that have been raising money, what they've been using that money for,
how they've been utilizing that money, how they've been raising that money. I mean, I've heard an unbelievable amount of variance in different causes and reasons for this money. Everything from quote unquote investigative journalists to people that have all kinds of different causes coming in and justifying their reason for this. Those are all the type of people that are going to be affected by these emergency measures. So in order for us to understand whether or not the measures are appropriate and affect the appropriate people, we need to understand who those people actually are in the first place. The second aspect of the proposed addition to the study, which are the impacts of the blockades on the Canadian economy and Canadian workers, is for us to understand the tolerance of the measures that the government has put into place. Right? We're going to study the impact as per this motion as currently worded. And we're going to be thinking about, are these appropriate measures? Well, we should absolutely understand exactly what the economic impact of these blockades have been, not just in Ottawa, not just at the Ambassador's Bridge, but on families and with workers. To understand that if this was to happen again in the future, or if this was to be a regular tactic, and it's not like we haven't seen tactics similar to this before, whether or not the measures that are proposed in the Emergencies Act are an appropriate use, or if we should be looking at other methods. So I think both aspects of this, both the financing of the legal blockades, where that financing is coming from, what it's being used for, how it's been tracked by the various agencies like FinTrack and the like, is very pertinent to this study. Secondly, the impacts of the blockades on Canadians and importantly, Canadian workers. We have heard about individuals that have been laid off, plants and factories that haven't been able to continue. Understanding that, I think, will provide a lot of context to this particular study.
Thank you. I've got from the floor MP Baker's hand, then MP Zerowitz's hand went up, and then I saw MP Blakey after that. So MP Baker.
Thanks, Chair. So I think, I mean, I agree with a lot of what Mr. Beach just said. But I mean, maybe I could just briefly say that, you know, in the motion that Mr. McLean proposed, you know, there was a desire to study the powers given to financial institutions and to share personal information and other aspects. And so I think if we want to study that, I think what Mr. Beach is proposing in terms of understanding the financing of the blockades is important. Like, they go hand in hand. To understand whether certain powers are reasonable or certain disclosures are reasonable around finances, it's important to understand how the blockades are financed. So I think they go hand in hand, and so that's why I think that part of what he's proposing is helpful, I think, to the study. And then in terms of the impact of the blockades on the Canadian economy and Canadian workers, again, if you're going to evaluate a measure taken by government to solve a problem, then it's important to fully capture the impact.
MP Baker, you will have the floor, but I do need to suspend. This is coming from powers upon high. I understand, clerk, and for the interpreters, we need to suspend for 30 minutes. So we will need to suspend for 30 minutes to air the booths, and so for our protocol measures at this time.
Oh, well, I guess we're suspended. Okay.
Yeah,
I have a question.
We're suspending. Yeah, we are suspending for 30 minutes.
Okay, so we'll be back. My clock says
about 6:45
Central. Yeah. Okay, so 6:45 Eastern.
6:45. Thank you. With who left the floor last, we had MP Baker.
So I had finished what I wanted to say, Chair.
Oh, you did? Okay. So I did have MP Zarowitz on next, not still in the room? No? Okay. So I am going to move to MP Beach.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of my colleagues. We were able to have some discussions during the break. So I am going to withdraw my amendment and seek unanimous consent for the following. To amend the motion as such, we would add a new bullet under the study examine, which would read the financing of the protests and the blockades. I would further amend the motion under Part C that refers to inviting of the following witnesses. To change the part where it refers to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance alone for 2 hours, we would delete the word alone. And then further to add the Department of Finance to the list of departments that are on the next bullet point. And that with those amendments, we would pass the motion in its entirety on division. And I'd speak to that amendment, Mr. Chair. So maybe I'll speak to that amendment now, since I have the floor. Obviously, I think we still need to have a subcommittee meeting. We've got some programmatic stuff that we need to get to. I'll take members on their word that we're going to figure out a way to deal with C8, including some commitments that have been made around the scheduling of the minister. But I believe, having talked to everyone, that this is agreeable and that will get us out of here tonight with a path forward to examine this very important subject.
Thank you, MP Beach. MP Chattel.
Just a small change, but the title of it, or the first sentence, just to say any related measures taking regarding the blockage and that blah, blah, blah. It's mostly cosmetic.
Okay, so where's the change, MP Chattel?
It's in the first sentence. And after the comma, and related measures regarding the blockages.
The blockages. Okay. And then I see, and then MP Zarowitz is in the room. I understand now. MP Zarowitz. Clerk, is that what you?
I don't think she can hear you, sir.
Okay. Is she in the room? MP Zarowitz?
Yes. We,
okay. We can hear you now. MP Zarowitz, you have the floor. You were on the speakers list.
please take me off the list, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Yes, we will take you off the list. Okay, I do see
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
McLean?
Could I just have Ms. Chattel repeat, because I'm not following where the comma is, at the end taken regarding the 2022 Freedom Convoy, and you want to add which words?
Oh, it's just to remove and refer to the blockages to follow the previous amendments, but it's cosmetic. So if you don't agree, then
so
I
we've agreed on the wording so far, Ms. Chattel. They're friendly at this point in time, so if it's okay just to leave them as Mr. Beach read them, I think it'd be good enough. Thank you. And I'll confirm the friendly amendment as well on B was Tuesday, February 22nd is when this hearings begin, no later than.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I think there was an ask for unanimous consent and then on division that we'd pass this motion. Is that correct? Okay, I do see everybody coming together. Terrific. Okay, so we have passed the motion on division.
Mr. Chair, may I thank all colleagues here. It was, I think we're going to do something really important and good for Canadians here. Much appreciated.
Thank you. I just wanted to, members, just as I have you still here, just on the C8 and the PBC, I know the clerk and analysts are seized with the calendar and trying to get this done. So we've gotten partway there, but if you will allow us to propose, myself working together with the discussions I've had with the clerk and the analysts to propose some of the dates, et cetera, so that we can get C8 and the PBC done. And we would send those out to you if that would be okay. Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, point of order. We did talk about a subcommittee here, and I suggest that because we have so many studies on their horizon here and time is always limited, that we have that subcommittee. I understand there's no availability tomorrow, but if the clerks can start corralling the witnesses for Tuesday, perhaps we can have the subcommittee meeting on Monday.
Okay, so clerk, if you could see if we have availability. And on that subcommittee, maybe we could still get some of that work done because the discussions, like I said, I've had with the clerk and the analysts, and I could distribute that to members and see if some of those dates and timings work. So just before our subcommittee. Okay, see everybody's head shaking in the right direction. All right, so I move to adjourn.
I move.
Okay. Thank you.